In the second section, we talked about the equipment and some of the procedures used in obtaining a natural gas sample. In this last section, let's look at the equipment and procedures used in obtaining an NGL, or natural gas liquid sample. This is the third section of a three-section module dealing with fundamentals of natural gas and natural gas liquid sampling. As with natural gas samples, there are some general rules you need to follow for sampling natural gas liquids. 1. Samples should be drawn from points on the line or vessel having a constant flow. 2. The probe should be sampling from the middle third of the pipeline. 3. To ensure a representative sample, a static mixer may be installed upstream of the sample point. 4. Liquid samples should never be taken from the top of a line. 5. Be sure to vent some liquid from the sampling valve before drawing any samples. 6. The temperature of the sampling cylinder should be lower than or the same as that of the sample to prevent flashing. To avoid possible rupture of the container or safety device caused by temperature increases during transport or storage, liquid sampling with the displacement method requires that outage be taken. Outage is simply creating a space within the cylinder by bleeding off a portion of the displacement fluid. At least 10% of the volume of the sample container is needed. Outage must be displacement fluid, not part of the sample. There are two types of sample cylinders used for NGL samples. The most common of the two, like this one, can be used for either gas samples or NGL samples. In some locations, however, other sample cylinders are designed only for NGL samples. As with gas samples, all liquid samples must be identified. The typical data needed for tagging liquid samples include the date and time sampled, the sample source, the location of the sample, a well, plant, or lease, the method of sampling used, amount of outage, volume of the sample, the name of the individual drawing the sample, the sample container identification number, type of displacement fluid, the separator or line pressure temperature, oil gravity, and any analyses to be performed. The two most common methods of NGL sampling are the fluid displacement method and the floating piston method. Sampling by the fluid displacement method requires that a sample cylinder filled with a displacement fluid, usually glycol, water, or brine, be attached to a sampling valve by tubing. The sample is drawn by bleeding the fluid and replacing it with the sample. Unlike gas, outage is necessary to prevent cylinder damage or loss of sample through a relief valve or rupture disc. The floating piston method of liquid sampling is similar to the fluid displacement method, except that a floating piston within the cylinder helps to maintain the integrity of the sample by separating and preventing the absorption of sample components within the displacement fluid. A more detailed discussion of both the floating piston and fluid displacement methods of NGL sampling can be found in the appendix of your student manual. In this module, you have learned the importance of sampling and the types and purposes of samples. We've looked at the equipment and procedures necessary for good gas and liquid samples. Take a moment now to look over your manual, review this tape again if necessary, and take the test at the end of this section. Remember, sampling involves more than just going out and grabbing a sample. Millions of dollars in both revenues and savings are determined by that small representation of product in your sample cylinder.